Have you ever stood at a gas station on a Tuesday morning, watching the numbers spin on the pump, and quietly realized the life you planned no longer adds up? Not because you failed, not because you stopped working hard, but because the ground beneath the American middle class is fracturing, silently, systematically, and faster than anyone in power will admit. Picture a family in Ohio. 2 incomes, a mortgage they stretch to afford, children in public school. They did everything right. And yet, by the 3rd week of every month, the checking account is whispering. The cushion is gone. The dream is performing stability while living on the edge of collapse. This is not a recession. No one will call it that. But across 10 American states, a slow, suffocating compression is underway, and most people experiencing it believe they are the only ones. If that hits close to home, tap the like button right now. You are not alone. Let us start with a number that sounds reassuring. The median household income in the United States currently sits at approximately $74,000 per year. On paper, that figure has the appearance of stability. Political speeches reference it. Economic reports celebrate its slow climb. Entire ideological frameworks are built upon its perceived adequacy. But here is what that number does not tell you. According to the MIT Living Wage Calculator, a family of 4 in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and Nevada requires closer to $90,000 annually just to cover basic necessities: housing, food, childcare, transportation, healthcare. Not vacations, not savings, basic survival. That $74,000 median is not a foundation. It is a shortfall wearing a suit, and the gap is widening in ways the headline numbers simply refuse to capture. Call it income mirage syndrome, the growing psychological phenomenon where a salary that once represented security now triggers quiet, private panic. The paycheck arrives. The bills consume it. Nothing is left for the emergency that is already forming on the horizon. Yet, because the income technically increased by 3% this year, no alarm sounds. No official crisis is declared. The family continues performing financial normalcy, while their actual purchasing power quietly erodes. Here is where it becomes genuinely alarming. Housing costs in these 10 states have risen between 28 and 47% since 2020. Childcare, once a manageable line item, now consumes between 15 and 25% of a middle-income family's gross earnings. Insurance premiums climbed again. Grocery staples rose again. And the salary, if it increased at all, moved at half the speed of every single one of those costs. So a family earning more money in 2026 than they did in 2020 is, by every functional measure, significantly poorer. The illusion of adequacy is perhaps the most dangerous economic condition a society can normalize, because it keeps the affected population silent, confused, and blaming themselves for a structural failure that was never their fault. Here is where the betrayal stops being abstract. There is a practice spreading across the housing, insurance, and utility sectors that economists have quietly begun calling obligation creep, the systematic expansion of non-negotiable costs that quietly colonize an ever larger portion of household income, not through dramatic price spikes, but through hundreds of micro increases that individually feel survivable and collectively become catastrophic. Consider what this looks like in practice. In states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arizona, homeowner insurance premiums have increased by an average of 31% in the past 2 years alone. Not because homeowners filed more claims, but because reinsurance companies, the companies that insure the insurance companies, quietly repriced regional risk after climate-related losses. That cost was passed directly, without negotiation and without warning, to the policyholder. A family in Baton Rouge now pays $3,800 annually for the same coverage they had for $2,200 in 2021. Meanwhile, utility providers in deregulated states have introduced what consumer advocates are now documenting as phantom infrastructure fees, line items on monthly bills labeled vaguely as grid modernization surcharges or reliability recovery charges. These fees average between $18 and $34 per month. They are non-optional. They did not exist 5 years ago. They are not clearly explained. And they are currently generating billions in revenue for utility corporations reporting record shareholder returns. This is the invisible enemy's signature move, extracting value through complexity. When a cost is confusing, most people do not fight it. They absorb it. They adjust their behavior. They quietly stop ordering the appetizer, drop the streaming service, delay the car repair. The sacrifice is made in private. The profit is reported in public. And the institutions responsible? They are not struggling. In 2024, the 5 largest U.S. property insurers collectively reported over $45 billion in net profit. The 6 largest utility conglomerates distributed record dividends to shareholders. The same quarter that millions of American families were quietly choosing between their electric bill and their grocery budget, these companies were announcing investor celebrations. Stay with this, because in 30 seconds, we are going to name exactly what this manufactured helplessness is doing to the psychology of an entire generation. Something is shifting, and it does not feel like resignation anymore. The emotional arc of the American middle class across these 10 states has moved, quietly but unmistakably, from confusion to exhaustion to something colder and more focused. Call it structural rage, the specific fury that emerges not from a single bad event, but from the accumulated realization that the system was never miscalibrated. It was deliberately designed this way. The data is beginning to reflect it. Surveys conducted across Florida, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Tennessee, Louisiana, Arizona, and Mississippi in late 2024 found that 61% of respondents described their financial situation as stable on the surface, deteriorating underneath. They had the vocabulary of stability. They owned homes, held jobs, sent children to school. But 73% reported having less than 1 month of emergency savings. 44% had skipped or delayed medical care due to cost in the previous 12 months. These are not poverty statistics. These are middle-class statistics. That is the earthquake no one is announcing. And behavior is changing in ways the mainstream economic narrative has not yet processed. Across these states, food co-ops have seen membership surges of between 40 and 90% since 2022. Community bulk buying networks, informal collectives where neighbors pool purchasing power to buy staples at wholesale prices, have emerged in suburban neighborhoods that, 5 years ago, would never have considered such arrangements necessary. In Tennessee and Georgia, a growing movement of families is quietly exiting traditional retail grocery chains entirely, sourcing directly from regional farmers and buying clubs. This is not poverty-level behavior. This is middle-class adaptation to systemic betrayal. And it is spreading. Some families are making more radical calculations. Interstate migration data shows a significant uptick in exits from high-cost suburban markets, with families relocating not just for affordability, but for community, specifically for communities where neighbors still have dinner together, where local institutions still function, where the social infrastructure has not yet been monetized. The breaking point does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it looks like a neighborhood Facebook group where someone quietly asks if anyone else wants to split a bulk flower order, and 40 people respond within an hour. That is the sound a society makes when it stops waiting for institutional rescue and starts building the alternative. This is the moment. Drop your breaking point in the comments below. What was the specific moment you realized the system was no longer working the way it was supposed to? Your story matters here. Here is the truth no policy brief will print at the top of the page. The collapse happening across these 10 states is not a bug in the American economic system. It is increasingly difficult to describe it as anything other than a feature, a predictable, documented outcome of policy choices made over decades that consistently prioritized capital returns over household stability. The era of the self-sustaining middle class is not struggling. It is structurally over in its previous form. The family that could buy a home, raise children on one income, build savings, and retire with dignity is not a casualty of bad luck. It is a casualty of a system that was systematically repriced out of reach. What remains is a choice in how to respond. Some will continue performing normalcy, hoping the gap closes. Others are already building the alternative, smaller, more local, more interdependent economies that do not require institutional permission to function. But here is the question that should follow you out of this video and into every dinner table conversation, every local election, every quiet moment of private accounting. If the system that was supposed to provide security is producing insecurity at scale, what exactly are we still waiting for it to fix? The answer to that question may be the most important political and personal decision of this generation. If this changed how you see what is happening around you, subscribe, because this is only the beginning of what we are uncovering. One important note before you go. This video was produced strictly for informational and educational purposes, drawing exclusively on publicly available data, government reports, academic research, peer-reviewed economic analysis, and verified consumer advocacy documentation. All statistics cited reflect figures available in the public record at the time of publication. We do not represent, affiliate with, or advocate on behalf of any government agency, political party, corporate entity, or ideological organization. The analysis presented here is independent and editorially autonomous. Economic conditions are dynamic. Viewers are strongly encouraged to consult licensed financial, legal, or housing professionals before making any personal financial decisions based on information presented in this or any other video. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay critical, and question everything.